Yeah, so the bottle deposit, mainly part one, right? Okay.
Part one.
Not part two of the bottle deposit. So there were a couple of things that we were discussing that occurred in last night's episode.
So I looked up some stats. So with the bottle deposit specifically, they make a comment like, "Oh, what's some sarcastic comment about like homeless people collecting bottles." And what's the chubby guy? What's his name? Newman. And they like asked Newman, like, "Why do you think they've been collecting bottles?" And he's like, "Well, I don't know. They're crazy, essentially." So I was looking up statistics on schizophrenia and mental illness.
It says deranged.
Deranged.
Oh.
There we go. Some interesting stats on the homeless indigent population with specifically alcohol abuse and schizophrenia. So I think we all know that it's a serious problem in the homeless population, and specifically there's several factors that may make someone who has these conditions more likely to be homeless, or homeless people more likely to have these conditions. So it kind of goes both ways. Specifically, with the homeless population, many have run away from home because they may have some type of abuse or sexual experience that they couldn't, get past. So that's a huge problem, and that in turn may lead them to drink or do drugs. So then they get into substance abuse and all kinds of illegal activities. But at the same time, people who are homeless say, well, this is part of the culture. If you want to be inducted into the homeless culture, you also have to do drugs and alcohol. So it kind of goes both ways. And then specifically, I looked up some stuff on homeless adolescents, and it says up to 60% of them, with their departure from their home, may be due to physical abuse or sexual abuse and family conflict. So that's how their homelessness manifested itself. And then as far as the prevalence of mental illness in the homeless, it says 20 to 25%, according to the National Coalition for Homeless, have severe mental illness, which is to compare to the U.S. population, only 6%. So it's a significant proportion of the mentally ill are accounted for by the homeless population.
That makes sense too, because part of when we had our lecture yesterday, when we were talking a little bit about the psychotic disorders and stuff, and we were talking about the development, we were talking too about how challenging it is for them to hold it, for people with schizophrenia, how challenging it is for them to hold a job and things like that. So that can also play into how they end up
and then they cope with drugs and alcohol
and the comorbidity with that.
So it says approximately 38% of homeless people turn to drugs and alcohol. So when you account for it, nearly 25% have a mental illness, and then nearly 40% are doing drugs and alcohol. There's a significant overlap. And then with all the abuse, and there's probably family histories of addictive disorders and this and that we don't have to delve into. But they attribute a lot of those things to uncleanliness and risk factors for other medical conditions. HIV, tuberculosis, and this downward spiral can occur.
So yeah, I actually have a comment about Elaine and her
compulsive bidding.
Her compulsive bidding. So, as Kirsten said, she was supposed to bid on some clubs for her boss, and I think she was told to spend $10,000, maximum of $10,000, and she meets her nemesis there, and ends up bidding and spending $20,000. And I thought that could somehow be related to impulse control disorder, since I think according to DSM-4 or 5, it says failure to resist temptation or urge, resulting in impulses that cause harm to oneself. So there wasn't necessarily any harm caused, but it's not normal. So for someone to...
I think part of it, too, we'd have to know if this is, a recurrent thing for her, too, right?
That's true. In order to establish that.
Right, would that be behavior that she...
But could it be the beginning?
Right, exactly. Could that be the first episode? And then the other part, too, is that, in impulse control, aren't they also aware, potentially, of, the negative consequences, but just still do it anyway? And she, what she did, that's exactly what she did.
And we're also
assuming
she knew she
that
was
her
in
boss,
trouble, but she was still satisfied.
She was like, I can't stop.
We're also looking at this as if like servant vacuum, like her only, I guess, symptom or problem is this impulsivity. There could be other symptoms or things in addition to impulsivity that could be going on.
Right.
I'm sure there are other
So-
episodes of Elaine demonstrating impulsivity, not that I can think of any.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm thinking, like, what if
We
she
need Dr.
had,
Tobia for
what if
that.
she had something like, you know, what if she's just not impulsive? What if she also, you know, a few days ago, or just started having like racing thoughts or
Right.
flight of ideas, or you know,
Yeah, so
that
you
that could
wonder-
lend to something else.
Yeah, or you wonder if it's like the beginning of like a manic episode where you're spending a lot of money, or
Right.
like something like that.
Right.
Mm.
So, I know Drew and I were talking just a little bit before this camera started and debating. So I'm gonna let him.
Yeah, so
bringing his
we were
point.
talking about impulsivity and its relationship to the diagnosis of bipolar disorder or bipolar 1. So other than impulsivity, what are some of the other characteristics?
Elevated mood, distractibility,
Like lack of need for sleep.
What's it
or
called?
whatever.
Grandiosity, flight of ideas, talkativeness. I think those are some of them, most
Yeah.
of them.
Increased goal-directed activity.
Right.
That could be social,
Mhm.
school, or sexual. Psychomotor agitation.
That's a good.
And then involvement in any activity that has the high potential for painful consequences, like unrestrained buying sprees, or high-risk sexual behaviors, or business investments that might not be wise. So in the diagnosis of bipolar 1 disorder, you need to meet the criteria for a manic episode, which first would include a period of abnormally but persistently elevated and expansive and irritable mood, and it has to be persistent for at least 1 week, present for most of the day, nearly every day of the week. And then as far as the characteristics that we were just talking about, you would need 3 of those characteristics to describe that period of elevated mood. And you also need that mood to cause significant social impairment. And the elevated mood can't be due to like a substance or a generalized
So it's
condition.
sort of like.
There also is a
diagnosis.
note in the DSM-5. It says a full manic episode that emerges during an antidepressant treatment, medication or ECT, but persists at a fully syndromal level beyond the physiological effect of that treatment is sufficient evidence for a manic episode and therefore bipolar 1.
Interesting.
So there could be a little bit of overlap between drug treatment and a diagnosis of bipolar 1. Just something to keep in mind.
Because we didn't talk about like Tony with the car. So
Yeah.
with like Seinfeld's car when he takes it in, and then you know like Tony is clearly so fixated on this car being like the most important thing, and he can't believe that he didn't notice that like what was it like the stick shift or whatever was like ever so slightly
Yeah.
loose and all of those things, and then he ends up like stealing the car when he's like deeply offended that Jerry might take it somewhere else for service, and like that behavior is clearly not like normal behavior that I think you would expect from your mechanic.
Right.
I'm not really sure what you would
Yeah.
like how you would classify that, but I think that was another
I mean,
interesting.
it's like, you know, as far as like, OCD, usually the person's like a little bit aware of the obsession. I don't think
Right.
he's even aware.
No, I don't think he is
Unless it's,
either.
like, obsessive compulsive personality disorder, where the person
Right. It's just not aware at all.
doesn't have any insight.
Right. Well, and so that's what we were
Or
talking.
he just really loves cars.
Or
Well,
that's
true.
also.
And we were also talking about like the intermittent explosive disorder, which I have like some of the older criteria, but and we also again don't know if this is like a recurrent thing, although it's clear that Jerry feels that like he already knows when he's going into the mechanic that there's like this past history of some sort of behavior, but like this is definitely an outburst that I would say is out of proportion to like the triggering event, to like being upset that someone wants to like, you know, like if someone decides they want to see another doctor, are you gonna like
Yeah.
I don't even know, like hijack their medical record and, like, I don't know. So I'm not really sure, but there were like some of those features that I think were a little bit, I felt.
We might be back for part 2.